Okay, welcome. My name is Jane Lamason, and I'm a Master Gardener with Napa County. And we thank you for joining us again on the first Thursday of every month. We offer a library talk, Master Gardeners, in conjunction and in partnership with the Napa County Library. Tonight's topic is nature's communities, and we'll hear from Carol Glazer, Gail Nelson, and Martha McKenzie, who are Master Gardeners, and they're going to be sharing books that they have found inspiring. But before we begin, I'm going to turn it over to Stephania, and she's going to talk to us a little bit about some of the books you can find in the library. Stephania?
Good evening. I'm Stefana Pramick, and I'm so glad you've joined our program tonight. Over the past months, I've recommended titles reflecting the subject the UC Master Gardeners are presenting for the evening. And tonight, it's their turn to delve into titles that they feel provide important information about gardening, but also books that encourage us to think deeply about the way we think about the soils and our relationship with the land, and how we can give our planet the greatest care possible in order to live in balance with other living beings. So tonight I'm taking a little bit of a break, and I'm not going to be recommending any books because you have a plethora of materials that are going to be recommended to you tonight. And they're quite an interesting, I took a look at the list, and they're quite an interesting array of materials that I think you'll enjoy. All these books are available for you at your local Napa County Library. And if by chance we don't have them, then we can place a hold for you, and they are available in our Link Plus system. So please stop by your library and check us out. All right.
Thank you, Stephania. Okay, just a little few housekeeping things. First, I wanted to remind everyone to please mute yourself and turn off your video. And we will just start talking tonight, reminding you about our mission. We are volunteers trained and certified by the University of California. We're non-paid educators, basically, and we're here to offer the latest research-based information. And our goal is public education within the community. Next slide, please. And you will, with the state, UC likes to understand how we are meeting our mission, and a survey is sent out about 1 to 2 months after you participate in one of our workshops or events. And what we're trying to do is to gauge our success. Or have we changed your gardening habits? Have you perhaps changed how you feel about soils, water conservation, and so forth? So please, if you receive the survey, we'd really appreciate if you would complete it, because it helps us. But if you don't want to receive the survey, please put your name in the chat box right now, and we will make sure to remove your name from that survey. And while we're talking about the chat box, if you have questions that come up this evening while our presenters are going through their books, please put them in the chat, and we will have time at the end of the evening to go through your questions. And again, thank you for joining us, and I'm going to turn it over now to Gail Nelson.
Hello, and welcome to our UC Master Gardeners Library Talk about nature's communities. We hope gardeners and non-gardeners alike will find a book or two among those we mention that will spark your interest in reading or listening to one, or gifting someone you know with one. It's nearly the gifting season. Many of the books on our list are available in all iterations, print, electronic, and audible, and most versions are available through our public libraries. I'm Gail Nelson, UC Master Gardener, and with me this evening are Martha McKenzie and Carol Glazer, also UC Master Gardeners. Last March, a few of us had gathered for coffee and started talking about books in general, and then specific books about nature that we'd recently enjoyed. The talk became so animated, and we got so excited about the various topics and books we're going to share with you tonight that we decided to do this library talk. We have provided a list of the specific books we're showcasing tonight with a short synopsis of each. Some of you who had registered by Monday have already received that in your email, and anyone else that would like a copy of it will get it this evening after this program is over. We added to the list several books we're not able to showcase because of time, but we also love them as well. We want to share books that invite gardeners and non-gardeners alike to explore our human place in the natural world. I have books about nature from two authors separated by 200 years. One collects evidence about the many aspects of the natural world and speculates on how they're connected. The other describes her wonder about how they are very much related and how we as humans are very much connected to nature ourselves. Carol's books reveal the importance of the vitality of the soil and how the making of it and how soil is used connect us to it. Martha will share the discovery of tree communication and how that impacts our own relationships to trees in the natural world. As you may know from previous library talks, participants are muted. Please type your comments in and questions into the chat, and we'll do our best to get to them during our time together. And with that, I will begin with The Invention of Nature, the biography of Alexander von Humboldt by Andrea Wolf. Yes, that Humboldt, the one a county in Northern California is named for. Alexander von Humboldt wanted to know everything about everything, and he had an inheritance from his mother that allowed him to indulge his curiosity. This amazing man tromped all over the world in the early 1800s, 1799 to 1804. Let that sink in a minute, 1799 to 1804, without any specialty gear, with just the regular rain gear of the time, regular 1800 clothes, regular 1800 shoes. He walked up Mount Chimborazo in the Andes, which stands at 20,700 feet, in just regular shoes. As a matter of fact, all of his explorations were accomplished without any modern equipment or oxygen supplies even. Von Humboldt was the first person to describe mountain sickness as a lack of oxygen at altitude. Sure enough, he got mountain sickness from lack of oxygen. And yes, he got malaria in the jungle. Time and again, provisions for his expeditions were destroyed by insects and rain. Still, he persisted. He walked, journeyed in canoes, rode horseback, and he collected data. What sustained von Humboldt and his companions from 1799 to 1804? There was nothing that we would consider modern to draw on to support such remote excursions or ask Amazon to send. They survived on excitement and discovery. And what excitement this explorer and naturalist brought back. A man of great foresight, he took voluminous notes. He was observant and diligent and collected so much data, it took him 23 years to organize and analyze it. Well, so what do we know today because of Alexander von Humboldt, and why is his biography called The Invention of Nature? Here is a drawing that he made of plants and trees that he found on this particular expedition, as well as fish, animals, reptiles, and insects. He collected daily observations of temperatures and barometric pressure. He was the first person known to use isotherms, isobars, and barometric pressure to describe climate. He charted the way air and water moved to create bands of climate at different latitudes and altitudes. He theorized the spreading of continental landmasses through plate tectonics and studied the role volcanoes play in the development of the Earth's crust. He said that when forests are destroyed, as was happening all over the Americas and in Europe and in Russia at the time and since, It disturbs nature's order and the fertility of the land and results in changes in water levels in streams and rivers and could possibly lead to global environmental changes. That was a pretty radical idea for 1800. His biography is called The Invention of Nature because he carefully categorized and explained his scientific findings. As far as we know, he's the first person to draw together systematic conclusions, which have proven correct over time, across environmental disciplines, our natural world. My biggest takeaway from The Invention of Nature is this. When he was in South America, von Humboldt developed his idea about harmful human-induced climate change. He described 3 ways in which humans change the climate: deforestation, ruthless irrigation, and through gas emissions in industrial centers. That was 200 years ago. How did he know? Observation, carefully recorded, analyzed over time. Alexander von Humboldt, explorer and naturalist, lived from 1769 to 1859. He was 89 when he died, had published 30 volumes of his scientific studies. During his lifetime and after, he became quite an influence to other pioneers in natural history. Charles Darwin credited Alexander von Humboldt with instigating his own voyages of discovery and explorations in the natural world. Von Humboldt really invented nature by being the first person to gather scientific data and tie it together correctly. Should you read or listen for yourself? Yes, I want you to be so amazed about Alexander von Humboldt that you will want to be reading more about him. My next reading suggestion is Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. I have a lot to say about this one too. She wrote Braiding Sweetgrass fully 200 years after Alexander von Humboldt explained his innovative theories. She shows us how humans live in nature's communities, respecting its many aspects. A scientist herself, Robin Wall Kimmerer describes living in the natural world with some science and a whole lot of feeling that we humans need to return to our natural community. Have you ever read a book that touched you deeply and then tried to describe it to someone else and found yourself practically babbling on about it? Well, that's how I feel about Braiding Sweetgrass. The first time I summarized it for this talk, I wrote 4 pages. So I rewrote it with only quotes from the author and ended up with 7 pages, but don't worry. That's not what I have for you now, although I do have some quotes from the book. The title continues, Indigenous Wisdom, Scientific Knowledge, and the Teachings of Plants. We know before we even begin the story that we're going to be connected to nature's communities. And before I finished the first chapter, I was connected to this book. Robin Wall Kimmerer is a citizen of the Potawatomi Nation, one of the families of the Iroquois people. This story about the creation of the earth is honored by them. The author begins the book with this story. Sky Woman falls from above in a beam of light. The creatures in the darkness catch her and care for her. Animals swim to the bottom of the ocean to bring back dirt to create land and a home for her. Muskrat gathered dirt, master gardeners call it soil, which was placed on the back of a turtle to create the land. This dirt began to multiply and also caused the turtle to grow bigger. Sky Woman, grateful, reciprocates with a bundle of seeds she carries in her hand. The turtle continues to grow bigger and bigger, and the soil continues to multiply along with the seeds until it becomes a huge expanse of land with plants and trees. When Iroquois cultures refer to the earth, they call it Turtle Island. In this way, the earth was made not by Sky Woman alone, but from the alchemy of all the animals' gifts, coupled with her deep gratitude. To the author, to be indigenous is to protect life on earth. That is our responsibility as human beings, to care for the earth, to reciprocate Turtle Island's fruitful generosity by reciprocity. By reciprocity, Robin Wall Kimmerer speaks to the alchemy of reciprocal giving. In other words, you receive a gift, you're grateful, and you give a gift, and that creates a bond with a person and with nature. Kimmerer is a professor of botany, trained at universities and in mainstream science. She also brings to the book her background as a member of the Potawatomi Nation and her training in traditional ecological knowledge. It is this other alchemy, the blending of scientific knowledge and indigenous wisdom, coupled with her botanical background, that makes for a unique perspective of the natural world and our place in it. I want to share a few quotes from the book. From her indigenous worldview, and I'm going to talk about pecans. Pecans are a sacred plant to the Potawatomi. She says, if one tree fruits, they all fruit. There are no soloists. Not one tree in a grove, but the whole grove. Not one grove in the forest, but every grove, all across the county and all across the state. The trees act not as individuals, but somehow as a collective. Exactly how they do this, we don't yet know. But what we see is the power of unity. What happens to one happens to us all. We can starve together or feast together. And here are the three sisters. For those who may not know, the three sisters are beans, squash, and corn. And she says, of all the wise teachers who have come into my life, none are more eloquent than these, who wordlessly, in leaf and vine, embody the knowledge of relationship. Alone, a bean is just a vine, squash just a vegetable. Only when standing together with corn does a whole emerge which transcends the individual. The gifts of each are more fully expressed when they are nurtured together than alone. In ripe ears and swelling fruit, they counsel us that all gifts are multiplied in relationship. And drawing on her scientific background, but weaving it with her ethnological knowledge, ecological knowledge, she says, what I do here matters. Everybody lives downstream. My pond drains to the brook, to the creek, to a great and needful lake. The water net connects us all. The pond has shown me that being a good mother doesn't end with creating a home where just my children can flourish. A good mother grows into a wise woman, knowing that her work doesn't end until she creates a home where all life's beings can flourish. There are grandchildren to nurture and frog children, nestlings, goslings, seedlings, and spores. Plants teach. I have 3 quotes from Robin Wall Kimmerer about how plants teach. First, let me tell you that mycorrhizae are fungal bodies that live in the soil and appear to have ways of interacting with all the plants in the soil that humans are just beginning to research and understand. The mycorrhizae may form fungal bridges between individual trees so that all the trees in a forest are connected. These fungal networks appear to redistribute the wealth of carbohydrates from tree to tree, the kind of Robin Hood. They take from the rich and give to the poor so that all the trees arrive at the same carbon surplus at the same time. They weave a web of reciprocity, of giving and taking. In this way, the trees all act as one because the fungi have connected them. Through unity, survival, all flourishing is mutual. Soil, fungus, tree, squirrel, boy, all are the beneficiaries of reciprocity. And strawberries. Strawberries are another one of the Potawatomi sacred plants. The author says, strawberries first shaped my worldview full of gifts simply scattered at your feet. They were just there. A gift comes to you through no action of your own, free, having moved toward you without your beckoning. It is not a reward. You cannot earn it or call it to you, or even deserve it, and yet it appears. Your role is to be open-eyed and present. And finally, I return to sweetgrass. Quoting the author, our stories say that all of the plants, Wiinga ashk, or sweetgrass, is the very first to grow on earth. Its fragrance is sweet memory of Sky Woman's hand. Accordingly, it is honored as one of the 4 sacred plants of my people. Breathe in its scent, and you start to remember things you didn't know you'd forgotten. Braiding weaves things together. Robin Wall Kimmerer uses braiding sweetgrass as a metaphor for how humans should weave their lives with nature in reciprocity for nature's gifts. Nature's gift of sweetgrass is a holy herb used by the Potawatomi for ritual cleansing of mind, body, and spirit. Stalks are gathered and actually braided. The braid is a talisman that is held, placed in the home, brewed into tea, and processed for oil. In this book, the appealing and wisely woven telling of this part of nature's communities. Robin Wall Kimmerer makes the connections over and again between the plant world, science, and our culture, not only her indigenous one. I hope you've heard too little about braiding sweetgrass, so you'll want to read or listen for yourself. And now Carol Glazer is going to dig deep to reveal some disquieting evidence about dirt and its marvelous transformation into soil, and what significance the difference between dirt and soil has for us. Carol?
Good evening. Thank you, Gail. And hello to all of you out in Zoom land. I'm going to share 3 books with you about soil that have taught me so much about being a better home gardener. Currently, there's quite a movement in the ag world towards regenerative agriculture. But these practices can be applied in our own home gardens to get better results. A startling fact is that in the last 100 years, we have depleted about 1/3 to 1/2 of the farmable soil in the world. How will we feed our world's population if we continue to farm in ways that deplete rather than build our soil? Agriculture around the globe has been employing practices that have singularly focused on increasing yield. The unintended consequence of this focus is depleting the soil and the nutrition of the crops grown. These 3 books are written by authors who have become gurus of a sort in the ag world, and they share an approach to farming that not only produces quantity, but also improves soil health and the health of the people and animals eating these crops. The first book I want to share with you is entitled Dirt to Soil: One Family's Journey into Regenerative Agriculture by a farmer in North Dakota, Gabe Brown, and it was published in 2018. Gabe Brown has become a major spokesperson in the regenerative ag movement. His passion is not only farming regeneratively, but sharing what he has learned through trial and error over 20 years in turning his farm into a productive, prosperous, and life-giving endeavor, and a farm that his son looks forward to managing one day. This book is so readable and straightforward, just what you might imagine from a farmer in North Dakota. It's the story of Gabe's struggles early on when he, a boy from the city, took over the running of his in-laws' farm and had 4 successive seasons of weather-related crop failures. He had to find a second job to be able to feed his family and was afraid he might lose the farm, but he didn't want to give up. He knew that there had to be a better way to make the soil and his crops more resilient to the fluctuations in weather. Through perseverance and belief in himself, constant observation and reflection, he began to experiment little by little. He transformed his lifeless dirt into healthy soil and discovered that he was actually building soil on his farm. He begins to see himself as a steward of the land who becomes inspired by partnering with nature and his herd of soil microorganisms, rather than trying to manage or control nature with increasing use of chemicals and other conventional practices. He starts the book with this description: our lives depend on soil. Next slide. This knowledge is so ingrained in me now that it's hard for me to believe how many soil destroying practices I followed when I was first farming. I didn't know any better. In college, I was taught about the current production model, which is a model based on the reductionist science, not on how natural ecosystems function. The story of my farm is how I took a severely degraded, low-profit operation that has been managed using the industrial production model and regenerated it into a healthy, profitable one. The journey included many trials and constant experimentation, along with many failures and some successes. I've had many teachers, including other farmers and ranchers, researchers, ecologists, and my family. But the best teacher of all is nature itself. In his book, which has become a guide for many farmers seeing the soil washed away or depleted, Gabe shares 5 practices that make this transition possible for all farmers, and the principles he teaches can also be applied in our home gardens. This picture that you're seeing right here is an example of conventional farming. I don't want you to think this is what we want our gardens to look like. And here are the 5 practices that can help you change from a garden that looks like this to one that's abundant. Limit disturbance of the soil. That means any kind of disturbance, mechanical, physical, or chemical disturbance of the soil. Armor, meaning keep the soil covered at all times. Nature always works to cover soil. Think about these poppies in this picture that are growing on our hillsides and the weeds that grow in our gardens. The third practice that Gabe talks about in the book is diversity. Strive for diversity in both plant and animal species on and in the ground. This means not growing a single crop in a year in a field, year after year, but growing multiple crops in a field. The fourth practice is living roots. Maintain a diversity of living roots in the soil for as long as possible. And when you're not growing crops that you want to harvest yourself, you can plant cover crops to keep the ground growing and producing, and those microorganisms happy. And the 5th point is animals, integrating animals into your land. Animals help pump more carbon into the soil. And in Gabe's words, if you want a healthy, functioning ecosystem on your farm or ranch, you must provide a home or habitat for not only farm animals, but also pollinators, predator insects, earthworms, and all of the microbiology that drive ecosystem function. Gabe's principles do not just build healthier soil, but healthy soil can also help to address climate change by growing healthy plants that work with microbes in the soil, where carbon is pulled into the soil by continuously photosynthesizing. In addition, soil organisms help to store that carbon in the ground where it belongs. When the percentage of carbon is increased in the soil, that soil carbon increases also the amount of water retained in the soil. An interesting fact, every additional percentage point of organic matter held in the soil, in an acre of soil, increases the water holding capacity by 20,000 gallons and keeps all that water in the ground. You can see in this photo, there are no plants growing in the soil, little organic matter to keep the water infiltrating and to prevent this erosion from happening. I enjoyed reading this book because I love to learn about how to grow life-sustaining soil and better vegetables. And I'm also very concerned about climate change. I'm so encouraged when I was so encouraged when I read Gabe's book and what he's done and what he's doing to raise awareness in the ag sector. He's making a difference both in the health of the food that we can make available to everyone while addressing climate change and protecting this life-giving asset of healthy soil far into the future. The next two books I want to share with you are written by a husband and wife team. David Montgomery is a geomorphologist by training and an award-winning professor at the University of Washington. And Anne Bickley, his wife, is a biologist and environmental planner. But before I get into those books, I just want to give you an idea of a couple other works that David has written that leads up to the books that I want to talk to you about. This is one of the sort of the pre books in his first learning about soil. David was exploring soil for a long time, and this was his first book, first book about soil, Dirt, the Erosion of Civilizations. And it chronicles how we humans have degraded and eroded our soil since the dawn of agriculture. This book was followed by another book by David called Growing a Revolution, Bringing Our Soil Back to Life, in which he explores farm practices on 6 continents and which practices that bring soil back to life. And now on to the first book of the 2 that I want to share with you. The first one is called The Hidden Half of Nature, The Microbial Roots of Life and Health. And it was written, as I said, by Anne and David, and it was published in 2016. In this book, the authors deeply explore the microbiome of the soil and the microbiome of our own bodies. According to Montgomery and Bickley, organisms like bacteria, fungi, archaea, protists, and viruses, and so many others that have not even yet been identified, make up this microbiome. And they are, to quote the authors, the smallest, most abundant, and successful creatures that have ever lived on this planet. Not visible to the human eye, but we can see the fruits of their labors in rich soil and in smoothly functioning digestive systems in our bodies. Part 1 of this book is the personal story of the development of their own backyard in Seattle, Washington. When they purchased their home, they had dreams of a lush, abundant garden and growing their own vegetables. But they soon realized after moving in that their soil, or dirt, we can call this dirt, I think, was dead, scraped clean of its topsoil. It had no biology, no worms, gophers visible to the eye, or those tiny organisms that bring life, minerals, and carbon into the soil. Being a biologist, Anne knew that she had to bring carbon rich organic matter into their yard, and lots of it. So she began regularly frequenting the local zoo for its manure piles and coffee shops for coffee grounds to layer in their backyard, along with wood chips and worm castings. She began to collect leaves and veggie scraps from their kitchen and grass clippings and green material to add to the mix and build a compost pile and made compost tea. I know those of you out there who are gardeners understand her compulsion to do this. She planted plants because she knew that they too would bring soil organisms as their roots grew into their hard as rock soil. And gradually, they started building rich brown topsoil that looked like crumbs of a dark chocolate cake, which you can see on the left. And in his other hand, you can see what the soil looked like to start with. Their backyard was turning into their dream within a few years' time. They attracted birds and beneficial insects and pollinators. They were building soil out of lifeless dirt with the help of all those soil creatures and lots of organic matter. To quote them, the secret to promoting life above the ground was to promote life below the ground. During this time, Anne was diagnosed with cancer. She went to work researching health, and she began discovering similarities between the microbiome in the soil and the microbiome in the human gut. The second half of The Hidden Half of Nature takes us on an examination of the workings in the human biome and the important role of different organisms living in our own digestive tracts. A quote, "Soil life that breaks down organic matter produces a steady flow of nutrients to plants. This echoes the way bacteria in the colon convert complex carbohydrates into a steady supply of beneficial compounds. In each case, a diet rich in plant organic matter delivers key nutrients critical for health and well-being. Simple carbohydrates and single mineral fertilizers, on the other hand, fuel rapid growth, but they do not supply the full range of nutrients that underpin the health of plants or the people who eat them. These tiny creatures sort the good from the bad, enabling our body systems to function effectively. As they explain in the book, we are as dependent upon microbes in our digestive tracts as plants are dependent on microbes in the soil. As a result of their exploration, David and Anne began to see the world in a different way, and it changed the way they eat, garden, and live. As David says, we need to put biology first. With their microorganisms' help and working with them, we can transform our understanding of agriculture and medicine. This book was fascinating to me because of the connection and similarity between the functioning of the soil and the human body. I had no idea that they were so similar. I have been interested in the impact of eating healthfully for years, and this book taught me so much about the processes within the body and has reinvigorated my attention to what I put into it. The last book that I want to share with you is also by David and Anne, and it is called What Your Food Ate: How to Heal Our Land and Reclaim Our Health. It was published in 2023, so it's just on the shelf. It is a continuation of their work in the prior book, exploring the relationship between human health and soil health. It is a study on how nutrients get into plants and into animals, and eventually into our bodies. And again, they show with much widely gathered research that it matters how we grow our food. In this book, the authors compare 10 pairs of farms, one farm using regenerative practices. To think about Gabe's 5 tips. That's the practices that they used, and 1 conventionally farmed. They grow identical crops and they compare the nutrients, phytonutrients, and minerals in the food that is produced on these farms. Their research tells us that food produced in good, healthy soil with compost, minimizing chemicals, tilling, and disturbance, maximizing the diversity of plants covering the ground, and growing them as continuously as possible, has more nutrients, and they are more beneficial to our health. To quote the authors, the health of the land translates to planetary health and the health of our bodies. When our food system focuses on quantity versus quality, they make this point. A hidden hunger lurks beneath the surface of the modern sea of cheap, plentiful calories flooding the westernized world. They go on, but quantities harvested tell us nothing about whether these foods contain enough of the right mix of nutrients to help us grow when young and imbue us with health throughout life, especially as we age. They write about an inherent wisdom in our bodies to choose food that is rich in nutrients if we are not diluted by marketing and a history of eating a diet of highly processed foods. By integrating much scientific research, they conclude that the practices of current food production can undo the collaborative natural partnership between soil, crops, livestock, and eventually our bodies. They start the book with this quote, "Both hope and hype swirl around using food as medicine today. Yet, the more we learn, the more healthy diet comes into focus as a solid foundation for preventing and potentially treating chronic disease. In What Your Food Ate, Anne and David have taken me on a journey of what truly healthy soil practices can do for us all. This is a book that should be read by anyone producing food, eating it, or selling it, and those who seek to heal us." And now on to trees with Martha. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Okay. Do trees really talk to each other? What are trees doing underground when we can't see what they're doing? What is our role in protecting trees? I've read 3 books that gave me an insight into these questions. The first book is Finding the Mother Tree by Suzanne Simard. Suzanne Simard is a professor of forest ecology at the University of British Columbia. She studies the trees in commercial forest, also called plantation forests, in the Northwest, Oregon, Washington, and of course, British Columbia. This book traces the author's lifetime study of trees and how they communicate. Trees cooperate and talk through underground networks of mycorrhizal fungi. These fungi have many branching threads. There should be another slide here for this. Branching threads, there we go. There you can see the threads underneath one plant and what grows underneath. The branching threads are mycelium that grow from the root tips of the trees, and they connect with roots of other trees to form a network that spans vast areas. Suzanne began this discovery as an intern in forestry when she observed that webs of fungi around seedlings were when they were planted in newly clear-cut forests. They were yellow and barely had any roots. And this begins her study of how mycorrhizal fungi affect tree growth. This is a slide of a plantation forest where the commercial forest, they plant all of these, in case are spruce trees. They're all the same tree planted at the same time. And you can see in the background where they've clear cut an area of getting ready to put new trees in. And this is what we're talking about, commercial forests or plantations. Suzanne, after much work, she published her findings to show how forest interplanting of firs and birches are healthier than clear-cut plantations replanted with just one species, like the previous slide. In 1997, she's featured on the cover of Nature magazine with data showing that trees actually pass sugars and water via underground fungi. This is a drawing that she did. There's the fir tree and the birch, and how the roots and the mycorrhiza combine and trade information. You can't quite read it, but that's what she's showing there, drawing. It turns out, though, that in 1997, when she published these findings, not all her peers in forestry accepted her findings, and there was a lot of pushback. However, in subsequent years, many other scientists found even more exchange of information between trees. Simeon's own studies show forests are like the World Wide Web, with trees linked by mycorrhizal fungi. This is a picture of Suzanne. Further studies show that dying trees send out their remaining energy to nearby baby trees. Birch trees going with firs, an intermix of trees, result in both trees growing bigger, healthier. Clear cutting of trees deprives the forest of connecting fungi, and even dying trees can pass on energy. In 2015, Suzanne Simard founded the Mother Tree Project to explore these connections and communication between trees. The investigation and discoveries by her and by many others continue today. I found that this, Finding the Mother Tree, is quite readable. Suzanne Simard writes about her scientific journey of communication between trees, but she intersperses it with family anecdotes, stories, and a lot of photographs. She explains the communication between trees in such an interesting way, you can't help but learn a lot about that trees do indeed talk to each other. The next book that I read is called The Hidden Life of Trees by Peter Wohlleben, who is a German forester. Like Finding the Mother Tree, this book also emphasizes that trees speak to each other via underground fungi. The author likens it to a forest internet connected by the fungi which communicate to trees around it. The photo shows some exposed roots and how they interconnect. Imagine, though, that these are just exposed. Imagine all this underground with the fungi and the mycorrhizae at the root tips. The chapters describe different aspects of this communication, much like Suzanne Simard's book. For example, research has measured the sound vibration in tree trunks that signal a lack of water. Trees also emit signals via the fungi when a tree is imperiled. The chapter titles are quite descriptive. The Motherships of Diversity talks about the many ways that both living and dead trees are beneficial. Dead wood like this dead log here, provides food and shelter for thousands of species of animals and insects. The soil around dead trees also teem with bacteria, fungi, and insects. Even dead forests protect erosion from rain runoff, and they also moderate extremes of temperature. The chapter entitled Burnout discusses how pioneer trees colonize open space left after a fire. The pioneer trees grow fast, using a lot of energy, and they're eventually overtaken by the slower growing trees like maple, beech, and silver fir that grow to seed. This is an aspen grove, and this was, I thought, one of the more interesting things about reproduction. In talking about reproduction, the aspen was especially interesting. Aspens typically grow about 100 to 130 years old. As a tree dies, it's replaced by new stems growing from the roots. The aspen grove in Fish Lake National Forest in Utah has a mother tree named Panda. The grove is 108 acres, all clones of the one tree that's estimated to be thousands of years old. The chapter Immigrant deals with immigrant trees that were brought to North America from Europe and vice versa. Another chapter called Street Kids discusses street trees in urban areas and the difficulty they have because they can't spread their roots. The author advocates replanting plantation forests with trees of various species to achieve the diversity of a healthy forest. Unfortunately, it would take about 500 years to achieve equilibrium. The message is trees live in a slow lane. And this is a diverse forest that he envisions he would like. The third book I read, the first two were nonfiction. The third book is a novel. It's The Overstory. It's a book by Richard Powers. It won the Pulitzer Prize for Fiction in 2019. This is a novel about nature and especially trees and the conflict between humans and nature. It's written like a tree form, and it has 4 parts: roots, trunk, crown, seeds. The roots section introduces 9 characters who each have a backstory and are not yet connected to each other, although they have a tree somewhere in their story. One was saved by parachuting into a banyan tree. Another was paralyzed by falling out of a tree. Some had family histories of planting trees. One of the characters teaches how trees talk to each other via miles of fungal threads. Sounds familiar to the other 2 books. In the trunk section, the characters are summoned together in different ways to save a virgin redwood forest. This act of eco-activism has 2 of the characters tree sitting to save the redwoods. This section culminates in a dramatic event where the characters defend an ancient forest from logging. In the crown section, the characters separate and spread out to live their own lives. It is a bittersweet section as the results of their activism haunts them. The last section, seeds, spreads the seeds of hope for some of the characters. The author wants us to think about the environment and what people are doing to it. As one of the characters in the book says, the best arguments in the world won't change a person's mind. The only thing that can do that is a good story. That applies to all 3 books. If you read any one of them, you'll never see trees the same way. And thank you for joining us tonight to hear about books that explore our place in the natural world. And I'll turn it back to Lonnie.
Thank you, Martha, Carol, and Gail. That just warmed the heart of this old librarian to hear you do such beautiful book talks. We're going to get to your questions in a minute. Gail, can you advance to, do we have, well, we've got our, oh, perfect. Back up one back. There we go. If you do not have our Master Gardeners of Napa County webpage bookmarked, you should. The address is here for you, and it will offer you just a small universe of wonderful information to help you be a better gardener. Next slide, please. And when you pull up our webpage, this is what it looks like. And what I wanted to tell you about was a link to past programs and events, which is about halfway down the page under the big blue box talking about our books. And if you click on past programs, you will be able to pull up this Zoom presentation so you can get all the book information if you haven't jotted it down. And you can also see all the other programs that we have done for the past 4 or 5 years anyway. So it's a wonderful resource. I think that's about it. Let's see if we do have any questions. I'm not seeing any. Jill will get you the book list. And just a reminder to anybody else, if you need Gail to email you that book list, let us know in chat. Otherwise, I think we are finished for the evening. And I would like to remind you that Library Talk will take a brief break in December, but please join us again on January 4th. And we're going to kick off a new year of fabulous programs. So I think that's it. Thank you very much.